Hello everyone and welcome back to Sherlock Holmes. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Julie Jensen was born in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and was the only girl among her 6 brothers. Growing up in a devout Christian family, she experienced an abundance of love and support. She was known for her sweetness, fun personality, and exceptional talents. In the early 1980s, she met her future husband, Mark Jensen. The couple dated on and off throughout college, and after Mark graduated, he and Julie decided to marry. They tied the knot in the spring of 1984 after their wedding. Mark and Julie settled in the upscale neighborhood of Coral Beach in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. Mark pursued a successful career in a prestigious stockbroker firm, while Julie also worked in finance as an administrative assistant at a brokerage in 1990. Julie and Mark welcomed their first son, David. 5 years later, their second son, Douglas, joined the family. Mark was a driven and ambitious individual. Although quiet by nature, through hard work and dedication, he established himself as a reputable figure in the stock brokerage firm where he worked. On the other hand, Julie made the decision to stay at home and raise their sons after they were born. Being a devoted mother, she prioritized her children's well-being and dedicated herself to providing them with a nurturing environment. This decision allowed her to embrace the role of a homemaker and caregiver. Julie and Mark's relationship seemed picture-perfect from the outside. They exuded warmth and affection towards each other, smiling and charming. The neighborhood, with their infectious laughter, their love for each other, seemed unbreakable, leaving everyone in awe. The Jensen family was the epitome of the all-American family they lived in. A beautiful house, had a successful career, and were blessed with 2 happy and healthy sons. Their frequent outdoor chores, such as gardening and yard maintenance, only added to the image of a family where everyone seemed to enjoy each other's company. However, appearances can be deceiving, and it was soon discovered that dark secrets lurked behind the surface of the G's seemingly idyllic life. Julie and Mark were keeping secrets from the outside world. Secrets that would ultimately cost Julie her life as the truth came to light. It shattered the illusions the Jensen family had created. Neighbors who had been admiring their perfect partnership now found themselves questioning the facade they had witnessed. The truth about Julie and Mark's relationship would forever change the lives of those who knew them. On December 3, 1998. In the late afternoon, Mark Jensen called 911 to report that his wife Julie was not breathing. When the paramedics and police officers arrived at Julie and Mark's Pleasant Prairie home, they found her in bed under the covers, and at first glance she looked like she was sleeping. However, it soon became apparent to the first responders that Julie was beyond help. She was dead as medics and police conducted a cursory glance around the room. They didn't identify any obvious cause of death to Julie. There were no gunshot wounds, knife wounds, or drug paraphernalia in the area that could explain how she died. Mark explained to the police officers that after he picked up their 8- and 3-year-old sons from school, he returned home to find Julie unresponsive. According to Mark, Julie had not been feeling well and struggled with her mental health lately. The officer saw a bottle of antidepressants prescribed to Julie on the kitchen counter. Mark, devastated by the loss of his wife, revealed to the police that he had been concerned about Julie's well-being due to the difficulties she was experiencing with sleeping and eating. His distress grew as he desperately sought to understand what had happened to Julie that led to her death. The district attorney arrived at Mark and Julie's home in Pleasant Prairie with the intention of investigating what had caused Julie's death. Upon entering their bedroom, the district attorney observed that the position of Julie's body seemed unnatural, leading him to suspect that foul play might have been involved. Therefore, he wanted crime scene investigators to search the residence thoroughly. However, the district attorney was unable to establish probable cause for a search warrant to be issued on Julie and Mark Jensen's home. Despite the lack of legal justification, the district attorney remained convinced that something suspicious had occurred to Julie Jensen. He found Mark being consoled by the police department's chaplain and informed him that to conduct a thorough death investigation, investigators needed to be called in, and Mark consented to the search crime. Scene investigators arrived at Julie and Mark's home and discovered a home computer. In 1998, computers were still considered a luxury and not commonly present in the homes of the general population. However, recognizing the potential value of the computer as evidence, the investigators decided to remove it from the house and bring it to the crime lab for forensic analysis. The district attorney recently learned from the local police department that they were familiar with Julie Jensen before her death. In fact, they knew her by first name. This information raised several questions for the district attorney as he began to wonder if the harassment Julie had previously reported to the police had anything to do with her untimely death. As the district attorney learned more about Julie Jensen as he investigated her suspicious death, he saw she had kept a log of all the harassment she had received. Julie had been subjected to various forms of harassment for many years, ranging from minor incidents to more serious threats. Her log documented the various incidents she had encountered, providing a chronology of the escalating harassment she had experienced. Julie reported the level of harassment she received varied from her front porch furniture being rearranged to receiving explicit photos at her home. She even reported to the police that her husband, Mark, left X-rated images under the windshield wiper of his car at his office. The harassment tactics employed by her tormentors were diverse and unpredictable. Over the 7 years Julie and Mark lived in Pleasant Prairie, she contacted the police department dozens of times regarding the harassment. Despite her efforts to seek justice, the local police had limited resources and struggled to identify the perpetrator. Julie's repeated reports to the police went unanswered, leaving her frustrated and helpless. The small-town police department faced challenges in unraveling the harassment case and identifying the responsible party because the detectives working on the harassment case had a difficult time figuring out who the harassers were. They recommended to Julie that she and her husband Mark hire a private investigator. Frustrated with the limitations imposed by the police department, the detectives suggested a different approach. They advised Julie and her husband Mark to consider hiring a private investigator to assist with the investigation. By hiring a private investigator with additional resources and expertise, the detectives hoped to uncover the truth behind the harassment. The private investigator hired by Julie and Mark Jensen to investigate the harassment they were experiencing was a former police officer. During their initial meeting with Julie, the private investigator observed that the impact of the harassment was apparent. Julie exhibited signs of fear and concern for her and her family's safety during their initial conversation. Julie disclosed to the private investigator that she had had a fling with a coworker named Perry Teresa. Several years prior, she expressed her belief that the person harassing her could potentially be Perry. Julie informed the private investigator that her husband Mark was fully aware of the incident with Perry. Julie expressed to the private investigator that she felt tremendous guilt about the incident. She was concerned that Perry may have returned to cause further problems for her and her husband, who were attempting to rebuild their lives with their 2 young sons. The private investigator acknowledged the severity of Julie's situation and assured her he would conduct a thorough investigation to uncover any leads or evidence related to Perry and the harassment. He assured her that he would take all necessary measures to ensure the safety of her family, armed with Perry Tario's name as a potential suspect in the harassment. The private investigator delved into his background and discovered that he had recently moved from Wisconsin to North Carolina. This development raised suspicion, as Julie Jensen had mentioned the possibility of Perry traveling to Chicago and then driving back to Wisconsin to harass her. Despite the investigators' findings, Julie remained adamant that Perry was behind the harassment, determined to uncover the truth. Julie Jensen hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance outside her husband Mark's office. The private investigator spent numerous hours observing the premises, particularly focusing on the possibility of anyone lurking nearby. However, despite sitting patiently for hours, the investigator witnessed no one suspicious. Several days later, Julie Jensen called the private investigator to express her desire to terminate the surveillance. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Julie remained convinced that Perry was the culprit behind the harassment. In light of this, the district attorney investigating Julie's suspicious death took a keen interest in this incident. 1 month into the investigation into the death of Julie Jensen, the district attorney received the results of the toxicology tests conducted during Julie's autopsy. To everyone's surprise, the test revealed that Julie tested negative for all the common drugs and poisons. This development raised even more questions. To investigate this matter further, the district attorney requested the assistance of the crime lab computer experts. They began studying the Jensen home computer, hoping to find clues that might shed light on what had transpired. To their astonishment, experts discovered that someone had been searching for drug interactions and positions with a particular emphasis on ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, is a highly toxic substance that can have fatal consequences if ingested. The district attorney immediately recognized the significance of these suspicious internet searches. He promptly asked the medical examiner to repeat the toxicology test on Julie's blood, but this time he instructed them to search for ethylene glycol. Specifically, when the second round of tests came back, the district attorney's suspicions were confirmed. Traces of the deadly poison were found in Julie's system, although the district attorney knew that Julie was poisoned. He did not have enough information to determine the manner of her death. Was it intentional or was she murdered? While the district attorney investigated, he discovered that Julie had sought help from a family therapist in the early 1990s. The therapist diagnosed her with postpartum depression after her first son, David, was born. He prescribed her the antidepressant Paxil to help cope with the condition. This information raised questions about Julie's state of mind further. The district attorney discovered that on December 1st, several days before Julie's death, she had seen her doctor and stated she was feeling miserable, unhappy, and depressed. As a result, the doctor prescribed her Paxil again, as she was already taking a dosage for depression. However, during the conversation with the district attorney, the doctor disclosed that Julie had expressed to him that she did not intend to take her own life. Despite the doctor's reassurances, the district attorney recognized the possibility of people saying one thing and then doing the opposite. Yet the district attorney still believed that there was something amiss in the death of Julie and believed that foul play was involved. There were several factors that led the district attorney to believe that Julie was murdered rather than taking her own life. Firstly, in cases where individuals intentionally commit suicide through ethylene glycol poisoning, it is common for evidence of the substance to be in close proximity to the victim's body. However, when investigators searched Julie and Mark Jensen's home, following her demise, no traces of ethylene glycol were found. Moreover, the quantity of ethylene glycol in Julie's body was relatively low. Raising suspicions to the medical examiner, the amount of ethylene glycol in Julie's system revealed a pattern of ingestion over several days. The district attorney sought to determine if Perry Teo, Julie's former lover and prime suspect in her harassment, had any involvement in her death as well. However, after the district attorney spoke to Perry's employer, it was confirmed that he was at work in North Carolina. At the time Julie passed away, this alibi ruled out Perry as a potential suspect, and he was cleared from further involvement in the case. The district attorney began scrutinizing Mark Jensen, Julie's husband, as the prime suspect in her murder after uncovering a torrid email exchange between him and a woman named Kelly Labate, an assistant at his brokerage firm. This discovery was made when computer experts inspected the Jensens' home computer and stumbled upon the incriminating messages. Kelly, who was married and resided in St. Louis, initiated contact with Mark, and they began meetings secretly in St. Louis. On several occasions before Julie J's death, for months into the investigation into Julie's death, Mark and his eldest son David showed up at the Pleasant Prairie Police Department seeking updates. Mark, who was already the primary suspect at the time, presented a unique opportunity for the detective to interrogate him. Recognizing the heightened suspicion surrounding Mark, the detective decided to take advantage and asked him to follow him into an interrogation room. While Mark was being questioned, an officer remained with David to ensure his safety and well-being. During the interrogation, the detectives questioned Mark about his relationship with Kelly Leon. Mark admittedly denied having any romantic involvement with Kelly, claiming they were just friends. However, the detective had in his possession the racy email exchange between Mark and Kelly. Additionally, the detective discovered that Mark had arranged to have Kelly, who had recently divorced her husband, move from St. Louis to his home in the small town of Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. This relocation, which took place weeks after Julie's death, raised even more questions about Mark's involvement. Furthermore, the immediately after her death, this act of discarding his dead wife's belongings seemed highly suspicious. Despite the evidence presented, Mark continued to deny the accusations and maintained his innocence in Julie's death. However, the detective surprised Mark by revealing a letter written by Julie prior to her death and addressed to the police department. Julie's letter stated that if she died, Mark was the person who killed her. In the letter Julie addressed to the police department, she expressed her concerns about her husband. Mark's behavior. She had discovered a note in Mark's business planner which caught her attention due to its unexpected nature. The content of the note prompted Julie to believe that it was not something she was meant to see. This note mentioned words such as drug supply, razor blade, syringe, which raised her suspicions. Julie wrote in her letter to the police department that she sincerely hoped that she was wrong and nothing would happen to her. However, her growing concerns led her to fear for her safety and well-being. Before she died, Julie took the necessary steps to ensure that her concerns were addressed. She entrusted her neighbor with the letter she had written to the police department, instructing the neighbor to present it to the authorities if something happened to her, who gave it to the detective. When Julie died in December 1998 during Mark's interview with the detective presented him with a copy of Julie's letter, which included a photo of the kill list. As it came to be known, the detective left Mark alone in the interrogation room. Observing him through the two-way glass, the detective returned to the interrogation room, determined to get Mark to confess to murdering his wife, Julie. However, Mark adamantly denied the claim, maintaining his innocence. Despite Mark's denials, the detective continued to push for a confession, even accusing Mark of the harassment that Julie experienced in the years before her. Mark insisted that he was not the first person to send the racy images to Julie. However, he also admitted that he had held on to them and planted more X-rated photos around their home to upset Julie after she revealed to him that she had slept with her co-worker Perry Tarot after spending 4 hours interviewing Mark. The detective realized there was no concrete evidence to incriminate him, despite their belief that Mark had killed his wife to be with his girlfriend Kelly. The detective and the district attorney were unable to prove the allegation with no sufficient evidence to hold Mark any longer. The detective had no choice but to allow him to leave the police department. The lack of evidence left Mark free to go, but the detective and the district attorney remained convinced that he was responsible for Julie's death, despite the toxicology reports indicating that Julie was poisoned with ethylene glycol. The lack of proof implicating her husband Mark made it challenging to establish his involvement in the crime. Moreover, the absence of evidence proving his involvement in the suspicious internet searches involving substance and drug interactions further complicated the case. Despite receiving a statement from Julie addressed to the police department stating that if anything happened to her, her husband Mark was responsible, the district attorney was unsure about the admissibility of the letter in court. The defendant's right to cross-examine any witness providing evidence against them posed an additional challenge. Since Julie was no longer alive, she could neither testify nor be cross-examined. However, the district attorney argued that this limitation should be disregarded if Mark was responsible for Julie's absence from court, as he was the only one who killed her, as the district attorney spent several years trying to obtain Julie's letter pointing to her husband Mark if something were to happen to her. As admissible evidence in court, Mark moved on and planned to marry his girlfriend Kelly. This revelation caused concern among the district attorney's team, as they feared Kelly would become the next victim. Recognizing the risk, the district attorney obtained an arrest warrant and charged Mark with first-degree murder. When Mark was arrested, he appeared shocked and was taken into police custody. However, he did not remain behind bars for long. Mark was able to post a $5 million cash bond securing his release. In the meantime, Mark continued moving forward with his life and married his longtime girlfriend Kelly, welcoming another child into their family. He also continued to raise his 2 sons with Julie. The detectives working on Julie's case and the district attorney were outraged by what they saw. They felt frustrated that Mark was seemingly moving on with his life, as if Julie never existed. The ongoing legal battle for the admissibility of Julie's letter cast doubt on the progress in prosecuting Mark. Years went by as the state continued to have the letter admitted, as evidence in court time seemed to stand still for both Mark and the district attorney's team, as they awaited a crucial decision that could impact the fate of the case. After an agonizing 8 years of waiting for justice, A breakthrough finally came in the case of Julie's death. The witness Ed Club provided the missing piece of the puzzle that detectives and prosecutors had been desperately seeking. Ed, a colleague of Mark Jensen, came forward with the crucial evidence that corroborated Mark's involvement in Julie's death. According to Ed, the night prior to Julie's disappearance, he and Mark were out drinking at a hotel bar during their business trip. While Ed was expressing his struggles in his marriage, Mark unexpectedly inserted himself into the conversation. Mark openly expressed his hatred for his wife Julie, and desire to kill her. Initially, Ed thought Mark was joking, but as he delved into the conversation, Mark revealed alarming details. He mentioned specific websites he had visited and poisons he intended to use to carry out his deadly plan. Ed Club, the witness, withheld his knowledge of Mark's threats for many years, fearing that he may have been overreacting. However, after hearing about the ongoing investigation and the lack of evidence, he felt compelled to come forward. He disclosed to detectives that he had harbored doubts as to whether Mark was serious about his homicidal intentions. After Ed's testimony, the judge took immediate action. Mark's bond was quadrupled, and he was promptly arrested and sent back to jail to await trial. Furthermore, the judge ruled that Julie's letter in which he implicated Mark as a suspect would be admissible in court. This crucial piece of evidence shedding light on Mark's potential motive and threats would play a vital role in strengthening the prosecution's case against him on January 8, 2008. 9 years after the death of Julie, Mark stood trial. Mark's trial lasted 7 weeks. Making it one of the longest in Wisconsin history, the jury deliberated for 8 days before finally returning a verdict of guilty and sentenced Mark to life in prison without parole. 13 years after his conviction, Mark continued to file appeals. Finally, in 2022, the appeals court ruled that the admission of Julie's letter into evidence should not have been allowed. This decision paved the way for Mark's retrial. Mark's second trial took place in February of 2023. Once again, the jury found him guilty, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Story 2. In a world where the sacred bond of marriage is meant to provide a sanctuary of love and support, the tragic case of Micah Miller reveals a disturbing reality that the very person who vowed to cherish and protect her would ultimately be the one to drive her to the brink of despair. Micah's story is a chilling reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic relationships, the darkest secrets can lurk beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered, from harrowing details of long-term abuse to the heart-wrenching moments leading up to her untimely death. Every aspect of this case exposes a profound betrayal that would shake the community to its core. On April 27th of 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina was shaking into its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who had been married to a local pastor, John Paul J.P. Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. As the investigation into Micah's death unfolded, a complex and heartbreaking tale would emerge, one that would challenge the community's faith and test the limits of the justice system. What dark secrets lay hidden within Micah and JP's marriage? And how could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? The search for answers in Micah's case has become a rallying cry as her family and supporters demand accountability and a reckoning for the systematic failures that may have contributed to her untimely demise. Micah and JP first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, when she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, JP was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, JP was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship when Micah was 18. It was JP who officiated her marriage to one of his friends, Jeremy. Days both Micah and Jeremy were involved. In the church, Micah had several responsibilities at the church, including working with the media team, while Jeremy was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah would go on to become John Paul's secretary and babysitter for his growing family mind. UJP had already been married to Allison and was the father of 5 children. One of these days, when Micah was babysitting for JP's kids, Allison found her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. The two had clearly developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah and JP's marriages ended in divorce in 2016 as their extramarital affair was exposed to the public. Just a year later, the 23-year-old Micah would find herself thrust into a new role, that of stepmother to JP's 5 children, as the two wed, and Micah became the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, and even traveling abroad on mission trips to Kenya. Her dedication to her faith in the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with JP remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church group, so did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband, JP. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she had been subject to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, sexual, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse. Throughout her marriage, Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced. They alleged that JP had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her and undermine her creditability. Even more disturbingly were the claims that JP had installed multiple tracking devices on Micah's vehicle, an apparent effort to maintain an iron grip on her movements and activities. Despite the overwhelming control JP exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023. Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps towards reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying JP's will. Just months later, in October of last year, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience, as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's decision to leave JP did not come without a price. A couple of times she contacted the police after sensing that someone was tailing and stalking her, which made her apprehensive as she made an effort to detach herself from the bond of marriage. Micah reported that her tires had been slashed and a tracking device had been found on her car, further fueling her concerns about JP's obsessive need to maintain control over her. These incidents only served to heighten Micah's sense of vulnerability as she navigated the treacherous waters of a divorce, while constantly looking over her shoulder, fearing the repercussions of her actions. The months leading up to Micah's tragic death were marked by a series of disturbing incidents that only served to heighten the sense of unease and suspicion surrounding her relationship with JP. As Micah fought to extricate herself from the marriage and assert her independence, JP responded with a series of increasingly desperate and sinister tactics designed to maintain his control over her. In February 2024, Micah's fragile sense of freedom was shattered when JP orchestrated her involuntary hospitalization. Under the guise of concern for her well-being, JP claimed that Micah was not properly taking her medication, a pretext that allowed him to have her forcibly admitted to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through this ruse, firmly believing that JP had exaggerated her mental health issues as a means of further undermining her and solidifying his control over the situation. The implications of this incident were chilling. JP took Micah to a psychiatric hospital against her wish, which showed his readiness to exploit the system meant for safeguarding susceptible individuals. He had weaponized Micah's mental health struggles, twisting them to suit his own nefarious ends, and leaving her feeling trapped and powerless in the face of his schemes. The following month, in March 2024, Micah's sense of security was shattered once again when she reported to the police that her tires had been slashed. This, however, marked just one of the instances in a sequence of events that comprised destruction, since it was later established that there was a tracker on Micah's car. Such findings escalated Micah's fear and suspicion as she was separating and heading toward divorce. The fact that the tracking device had been used was chilling, showing how JP could go to all lengths in order to control and keep tabs on every move Micah made. Even as she tried to escape his grip, the knowledge that she was being watched, that her every step was being tracked, must have been a constant source of anxiety and dread for Micah, a reminder of the power that JP still held over her as the divorce proceedings continued. Micah filed for spousal support with a hearing scheduled for June 5th. This was a defiant gesture and a clear message that she would not be intimidated by JP's efforts to hold on to her money forever. However, the tensions between the couple were further exacerbated in mid-March when Micah requested JP $22,000. For a trip JP did not provide Micah with the money she requested. His refusal was rooted in his suspicion that the money would not be used for the purpose she claimed, which further highlights the control he had over their finances and decision-making. Around the same time as this financial conflict, JP had Micah hospitalized using his power of attorney over her care. While Micah was hospitalized, JP took her purse and car keys and retrieved her car from a parking lot. JP claimed that he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do when she was released from the hospital. However, it was JP who threatened Micah's family, stating that he would prevent them from seeing her in the hospital if they did not cooperate with him. Micah's father, Michael, requested to see the papers that gave JP power of attorney over Micah's care. Upon inspection, Michael noticed that the documents were neither signed nor notarized, suggesting they were not official. The stage was set for a tragic and heart-wrenching conclusion to Micah's story as the noose of JP control tightened around her neck. The tragic events that unfolded on April 27th of 2024 would become the focal point of the investigation into Micah's untimely demise. The details that emerged in the aftermath painted a complex and disturbing picture, one that would only deepen the sense of mystery and suspicion surrounding her death on the morning of April 27th. Surveillance footage captured Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's Pawn Shop, where security cameras recorded her entering the store at 12:12 p.m. and independently purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun. Micah's phone search history also showed that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a remote location in North Carolina, just before 3:00 p.m. The same day, Micah placed a desperate call to 911. During the call, she asked the dispatcher to trace the location of her phone, indicating that she was in a national park and feared for her life. Micah's final words to the operator were a chilling declaration of her intentions. She was about to take her own life. However, the 911 call has become the subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim to have detected a man's voice in the background, suggesting that M may have been coerced or even forced to make the call. Others have gone as far as to suggest that the 911 call was entirely fabricated, perhaps generated using AI technology as part of an elaborate scheme orchestrated by JP just over an hour and a half. After Micah's 911 call, a kayaker reported a woman's body in the Lumber River. It was Micah, having died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her black Honda Accord was found in the park's parking lot, containing a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for the firearm she had purchased earlier that day. The official cause of death, as determined by the North Carolina medical examiner, was a suicide by gunshot. However, Micah's family vehemently dispute this conclusion, citing the numerous bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds found on the body. They believe that Micah may have been forced or coerced into taking her own life, rather than making the decision willingly. JP maintains he had no involvement in Micah's death, asserting that he was not present when she passed away. His alibi is based on his whereabouts at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, approximately 3 hours away from where Micah's body was found. Multiple eyewitnesses have corroborated his presence at the event, and license plate readers tracked his vehicle en route to and from Charleston. Further supporting his claim, the investigation into Micah's death was further complicated by a number of inconsistencies and unanswered questions. The presence of multiple shell casings at the scene, for instance, raised concerns that Micah may have been the victim of foul play rather than a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Moreover, Micah's family and friends were adamant that her actions and behavior in the days leading up to her death were not consistent with someone planning to take their own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and had made plans to attend church with her loved ones on the Sunday after her passing. As the investigation into Micah's death continued, the Robeson County Eshe Sheriff's Office and the FBI worked together to gather more evidence and piece together the events of that fateful day. However, the public outcry for justice and accountability only grew louder, with Micah's family and supporters refusing to accept the official narrative of suicide. The suspicion surrounding JP's potential involvement in Micah's death remained in the central focus of the investigation. The allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial impropriety that had plagued their marriage only added to the sense that there was more to the story than met the eye. Ultimately, the investigation into Micah's death would become a complex and multifaceted endeavor, one that would test the limits of the authorities' abilities to uncover the truth and provide the answers that Micah's family and the broader community so desperately sought. As the investigation into Micah's death continued, JP's behavior and statements only added to the sense of unease and suspicion surrounding his involvement in the tragedy. The details that emerged painted a picture of a man who was increasingly erratic and unpredictable, his actions and words seemingly designed to confuse and manipulate those around him. Just a day after Micah's body was discovered in the Lumber River, JP made a startling announcement to the congregation of the Solid Rock Church. Rather than addressing the congregation in a solemn and respectful manner, JP's words were casual and unsettling. He began by telling the congregation that there would be no altar call that day. Instead, he asked them to stand up as he made an announcement. JP then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not discuss the announcement within the building. In a bizarre move, JP then asked the congregation to continue attending church and serving in their roles. Stating that he would be taking a break for a few days or weeks, he then delivered the shocking news that his wife had passed away, declaring that it was self-induced and had occurred in North Carolina. JP's demeanor during this announcement was equally unsettling. He appeared to be going on adrenaline, as he put it, and asked the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also claimed that Micah wasn't well mentally and needed medication that was difficult to obtain. The pastor's words were particularly jarring, given that Micah's body had been discovered less than 24 hours earlier, and the coroner had yet to determine the cause of death. The Robeson County Police were still treating the incident as a suspicious death, yet JP had already declared it a suicide, blaming Micah's mental illness. Despite the overwhelming evidence of abuse and manipulation that plagued their marriage, JP denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that the allegations of abuse were false and that he had never hurt Ma in any way. However, Micah's family and friends knew better, and they refused to accept his denials at face value. JP's actions in the days following Micah's death were equally disturbing. He pushed for immediate cremation, refusing to allow her family to view her body until they agreed to his demands. This only added to the sense that JP was trying to cover his tracks to erase any evidence of his involvement in Micah's death. In a move that deepened the sense of unease and suspicion, JP hired a lawyer and issued letters for an end to the accusations against him. These letters were filled with veiled threats and intimidation, as if JP were trying to silence anyone who dared question his involvement in Micah's death. As the details of JP's behavior and statements emerged, the public outcry for justice and accountability only grew louder. Micah's family and friends, as well as the community, demanded answers and called for the authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Mike's death continued, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office joined the probe, adding their considerable resources and expertise to the case. However, it remained unclear exactly what aspects of the investigation the federal authorities were focusing on. Micah's family expressed deep concerns about the thoroughness of the autopsy analysis. They spoke about the autopsy having no information related to gunshot residue and who it was that ordered the concerned authorities not to conduct these analyses. Secondly, the family also raised concerns related to the toxicology analysis of Micah, whether she was even in her senses at the time of her death, or was she under heavy substance influence. There was no record of any of that. The family's fears were compounded by the fact that Micah's body had been cremated shortly after her death, at the insistence of JP, making it impossible to conduct a second independent autopsy. This decision by JP only added to the growing suspicion that he had something to hide. As the investigation progressed, a range of theories emerged about JP's potential involvement in Micah's death. It was speculated by some that he might have used his boat to take Micah's body to the remote spot where it was found. Or maybe this 911 call she made may also have just been part of a ruse. The security footage from the pawn shop where Micah purchased the gun also came under scrutiny, with some theorizing that the timestamp S may have been altered to fit a particular narrative. The fact that JP had been reported to the police for transferring church funds to his personal account only added fuel to the fire as people began to question his motives and integrity. One of the most disturbing revelations to emerge from the investigation was the existence of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had kept as a record of the abuse she suffered at JP's hands. JP had called Micah's family over 100 times, trying to retrieve the documents, further fueling suspicions that these papers were incriminating towards him. According to her family, these diaries now belong to Micah's sister, Sierra, who had been appointed as a special administrator for his state, and they were seen as important pieces of evidence in the ongoing probe. Their contents promised to shed light on the true nature of JP and Micah's relationship and the events that led to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends remained steadfast in their belief that JP's abusive behavior and manipulation had driven her to take her own life. They pointed to the numerous police reports Micah had filed, detailing her fears for her safety and the harassment that she endured at JP's hands. The allegations of multiple affairs and financial impropriety only added to the sense that JP was a man consumed by his own desires and willing to stop at nothing to maintain control over those around him. As the investigation continued, more and more, people came forward with stories of JP's inappropriate behavior and the harm he had caused to those in his orbit. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, sparking a range of reactions and consequences. In the aftermath, the Solid Rock Church, where JP served as a pastor, found itself at the center of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving a barrage of harassing phone calls and messages from those seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was no less dire for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who had performed the medical examination on Micah's body found themselves the target of threats, as did Johnny Jacobs, the fisherman who had first discovered Micah's body in the Lumber River. Micah's family, led by her sister Sierra, remained steadfast in their refusal to accept the official narrative surrounding her death. They were convinced that Micah's death had been staged and premeditated by JP, and they were determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. The family's unwavering commitment to seeking justice for Micah was a testament to their love and devotion, as well as their deep-seated belief that the authorities had failed to fully investigate the circumstances surrounding her demise. As the details of the case continued to emerge, the public outcry for action to be taken against JP only grows louder. Micah's supporters, both within the community and across social media, demand that the authorities hold the pastor accountable for his alleged role in her death. The aftermath of Micah's death is a complex and multifaceted affair, with the reverberations felt across the community and beyond the harassment of those involved in the case. The unwavering determination of Micah's family and the ongoing calls for accountability all serve as a stark reminder of the profound impact that this tragedy has had on all those touched by it. Story 3, Drew Peterson was born and raised in Bowling Brook, a suburb of Chicago, Illinois. After high school, Drew enlisted in the United States Army and in 1977 joined the Bowling Brook Police Department. Over the years, Drew made a name for himself in the department, eventually reaching the rank of sergeant upon joining the police force. Drew was assigned to various units, including the Metro Area Narcotics Squad. His dedication and skill in this field earned him recognition from his superiors, as he was awarded the Police Officer of the Year award in 1978. Drew's passion for being a police officer was evident throughout his career. His colleagues described him as a cop's cop who enjoyed working closely with his fellow officers and dedicated his life to serving and protecting the community. In 2007, at 53, he retired from the Bolingbrook Police Department, leaving behind a successful career and a lucrative pension of nearly $80,000 a year, although Drew had a passion for law and order. Being a police officer in the military in Bolingbrook, he also had a knack for attracting women as a young man. Drew met his first wife, Carol Brown, in high school and married her in 1974. However, their marriage did not stand the test of time, and they divorced only 6 years later after Carol discovered Drew's infidelity. Before separating, Drew and Carol had 2 children, Stephen and Eric, in 1982. Drew met his second wife, Vicki Connolly, and married her. Their marriage, however, did not fare any better, and they divorced 10 years later in 1992. Drew met Kathleen Savio on a blind date, and the pair married in 2004. They had 2 children together, Thomas and Christopher. Initially, Drew was attentive and doting on Kate, always showering her with hugs and kisses and telling her how beautiful she was. However, as Drew and Kathleen's relationship progressed, his behavior towards her began to change. He started calling her ugly in a nutcase, according to Kathleen's friends and family around the same time. Drew started to change towards his wife, Kathleen. Drew met Stacy Kes, a 17-year-old working the night shift at a local hotel. Stacy, who had faced a forbidding upbringing, had lost 2 siblings before she turned 15, and in 1998 her mother disappeared to Stacy. Drew brought a sense of stability and protection with permission from Stacy's father. They started dating. Despite Drew being in a relationship with teenage Stacy, he was still married to Kathleen. One day, Kathleen received an anonymous letter stating that she was the laughingstock of the town because her husband Drew was sleeping with a teenager. Kathleen was stunned, and she decided to confront Drew about the allegation to her surprise. Drew did not deny having a 17-year-old girlfriend instead. He and Kathleen began discussing the possibility of getting a divorce after 9 years of marriage and 2 children due to their marital issues. Drew moved out of the home he shared with Kathleen. On the other hand, Stacy moved into Drew's new house only a few blocks from Kathleen's. Shortly after Stacy and Drew moved in together, Stacy discovered she was pregnant, determined to marry Stacy and embark on a new chapter in his life. Drew approached Kathleen for a divorce. After some deliberation, Kathleen agreed to sign the divorce papers, but only on one condition: that they would discuss the financial arrangements at a later time. On October 7, 2003, Drew and Kathleen's divorce was finalized just 2 weeks later on October 23rd. Drew and Stacy exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Drew seemed to revel in showing his hot young wife off to his former wife, often taking Stacy on bike rides past Kathleen's home, seemingly to remind her that he had chosen Stacy over her. The relationship between Drew and Kathleen continued to deteriorate between 2002 and 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 2002 2002 and 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 2002. 2004, there were several instances where the police were called to Kathleen's home to resolve issues between the two. These issues often revolved around custody and visitation, matters related to their sons. On March 1, 2004. Kath Savia was found dead in her bathtub in the master bedroom suite of her home. The circumstances surrounding her death were deeply suspicious. However, Kathleen's death was ruled an accident by drowning. Despite the absence of water in the tub, a coroner's jury decided this verdict based on the evidence presented, which included a statement by a police officer who vouched for Drew's character. The officer assured the jury that Drew was a good man and would never harm Kathleen after Kathleen's death. Stacy Peterson and Drew had another child together. Apart from raising her two young children, Stacy also helped Drew with his and Kathleen's sons. However, things took a tragic turn in 2007. When Stacy went missing on Sunday, October 28th, Stacy had planned to assist her brother in painting her new apartment in Joliet, Illinois that day. However, she never showed up, causing concern among her family when Stacy's brother reached out to her. He failed to receive an answer. This behavior was unusual. Stacy was known to never shut off her phone and always carried it as the day progressed. Without any contact from Stacy, her family reported her missing to the Illinois State Police. An investigation was immediately launched into the disappearance, and the detectives began questioning Stacy's husband, Drew W. The detectives sought to gather any information that could help them locate Stacy. According to Drew, the last time he saw Stacy was on Sunday, October the 27th, when he woke up to find her telling him she was heading to her brother's house to assist with a painting project. Drew claimed that he fell back asleep and was awakened by his children a while later at approximately 9 p.m. That night, Drew asserted that Stacy called and informed him that she had left him for another man. She also stated that she had parked her car at the airport. In the months before Stacy's disappearance, Drew claimed that she had become increasingly distraught after the death of her beloved sister from cancer. Several months earlier, Stacy's behavior seemed to change during this time, which led Drew to believe that she had developed mental health issues. However, inconsistencies in Drew's account raised suspicion among Stacy's loved ones. Stacy's family and friends did not believe his claim that Stacy had left their children behind and fled with another man in their hearts. They knew that she would never willingly abandon her children further. They believed that Stacy's distress was a natural response to the loss of her sister, rather than a sign of mental illness. As the investigation progressed, it became increasingly challenging for the detectives to make sense of what happened to Stacy. Everyone hoped that the young mother would resurface, bringing closure to a heartbreaking situation after Stacy's disappearance. Drew took a leave of absence from the Bolingbrook Police Department. He ultimately retired from his job, allowing him to receive his full pension. Since Drew was never convicted of a crime related to Stacy's disappearance, he was allowed to retain his pension during the early days of the investigation. Conflicting accounts and rumors surrounding Stacy's disappearance emerged. However, one thing that stood out was Drew's unwavering stance. He adamantly denied having any involvement in her disappearance and maintained his innocence throughout the media frenzy. Meanwhile, Stacy's friends and family remained concerned about her whereabouts. They organized searches and posted flyers throughout the city, urging the police to help find her. The search for Stacy soon became a community effort, with people from all walks of life coming together to help find her. Despite the widespread efforts, no trace of Stacy could be found. The police conducted thorough investigations, searching pawns, several search warrants on Drew's home, and even using cover dogs. However, no evidence was found to suggest that Stacy had met foul play or had any involvement in her disappearance. Drew took every opportunity to speak publicly about the case. He appeared on Good Morning America with a message for Stacy, urging her to come forward and let the public know where she was. In an interview with Larry King, Drew referred to himself as the mom to his children, saying that he had taken on the roles of both parents since Stacy's disappearance. Drew portrayed himself as a victim falsely accused by overzealous investigators, and the media. His demeanor conveyed a sense of entitlement and arrogance, as if he believed he was above the law 2 months after Stacy Peterson vanished without a trace. The police announced that Drew Peterson was the prime suspect in her disappearance. This news shocked the public, as Drew had previously been seen as a respected police officer and pillar of the community. In addition to the investigation into Stacy's disappearance, the authorities also announced that they were reopening the case of Drew's third wife, Kathleen Savio, who tragically died. Under mysterious circumstances, Illinois officials obtained permission to exhume her body on November 13, 2007. In order to carry out further investigations, Drew appeared on the Today's Show following that day, vehemently denying any involvement in either tragedy. Despite mounting EV evidence to the contrary, he insisted that he was innocent and expressed his disbelief that Kathleen's death was being reclassified as a homicide as the police investigation intensified. New information came to light that painted a darker picture of Drew's relationship with Kathleen. Kathleen's loved ones told investigators that Drew had threatened to kill Kathleen and make it look like an accident in order to avoid giving her half of his pension. This chilling revelation further strengthened the belief that Drew was capable of committing such heinous crimes. Furthermore, the medical examiner's re-examination of Kathleen's body determined that the cause of death was homicide. Contradicting the initial theory that she died by accident, this development came as a blow to Drew, who had been maintaining his innocence all along. In response to the medical examiner's findings, Drew expressed shock to the media, stating that he'd always believed that Kathleen's death was a result of a household accident. When the detective spoke to Drew Peterson's second wife, Vicki Connolly, she alleged that during their 10-year marriage, Drew had threatened to murder her and make it look like an accident. She also alleged that Drew had physically abused her throughout their relationship. Vicki's daughter, who lived with Drew until 17, corroborated her mother's account. The detectives learned that Stacy had expressed a desire to end her marriage to Drew. Stacy's friends and family informed them that Drew had accused her of not being attractive enough for him. As a result, Stacy had taken various measures to enhance her physical appearance, attempting to please Drew. Stacy had pursued cosmetic enhancement procedures, including breast implants, lac surgery, a tummy tuck, and braces on her teeth. These measures were driven by a desire to meet Drew's expectations and improve her appearance in his eyes. However, these efforts seemed vain, as Drew continued to harbor resentment and jealousy towards Stacy. Despite Drew's fears, Stacy's seemingly innocent interactions with others continued to cause him distress. Drew was deeply possessive and believed that Stacy was constantly cheating on him. As a result, he attended her gym sessions to ensure her safety and monitor her activities. However, Drew had maintained a steady presence of a girlfriend by his side. Drew's stepbrother, Thomas Murphy, came forward with crucial information. Thomas claimed he helped Drew carry a large blue barrel that felt warm to the touch into Drew's SUV. Afterward, Drew drove the vehicle and the barrel to an unknown location. Thomas's account was corroborated by Rick Mims, a friend of Drew's, who admitted that he and Drew purchased 3 blue 55-gallon plastic containers from their employer, a cable company, in 2003. Rick Mims also provided photos of these barrels to the detectives working on the case. However, Drew's attorney cast doubt on the reliability of Thomas's testimony, arguing that he had a history of substance abuse and that at the time of Stacy's disappearance, he and Drew were not even close. Stacy's sister Cassandra believed that it was crucial to have Drew Peterson take a lie detector test regarding his alleged involvement in Stacy's disappearance. However, her request was denied by his attorney. The attorney's decision to prevent Drew from undergoing a lie detector test further fueled speculation and suspicion regarding his involvement in the case. As time passed and Stacy Peterson remained missing, Drew Peterson became increasingly arrogant and self-absorbed. His ego grew exponentially, even going as far as to hire a publicist to manage his public image. In December 2008, over 1 year after Stacy's disappearance, Drew became engaged to a 24-year-old Christina Rains. She would have been his fifth wife. The relationship between Drew and Christina was unconventional, to say the least. Christina openly declared her love for Drew on national television, stating that they had a fantastic time together, and she believed he had done nothing wrong regarding his third wife's murder and his fourth wife's disappearance. Their appearance on The Today Show further fueled speculation and intrigue. Christina reaffirmed her support for Drew and spoke of how happy she was to be by his side. She dismissed any concerns about his legal troubles and portrayed their relationship as a genuine and loving partnership. Drew and Christina eventually broke up, leading to public accusations that their engagement was merely a publicity stunt designed to keep Drew's name in the media. Christina herself would later admit to viewing their engagement as a publicity ploy. The disillusion of their relationship provided further insight into the nature of their relationship. It highlighted Drew's narcissistic tendencies and willing to manipulate public perception for his gain. On May 7th of 2009, Drew Peterson was indicted by a grand jury and arrested and charged with the murder of Kathleen Savio, his then wife. His bail was set at $20 million. Despite his arrest, Drew maintained his innocence and joked about the situation. Acting nonchalantly, Drew hired a powerful team of attorneys to defend him, who referred to themselves as the Dream Team. In 2012, Peterson went on trial for the murder of Kathleen. According to the prosecution, Peterson murdered his ex-wife and then placed her body in a bathtub after she died. The timing of Kathleen's death was suspicious, as it occurred during the midst of a divorce settlement process. Kathleen was set to receive half of Peterson's pension as part of the settlement. The prosecutor presented evidence to the jury highlighting the time of Kathleen's death and its significance in the divorce proceedings. They argued that Drew's actions were motivated by greed and a desire to retain control over his assets. Although hearsay statements are ordinarily not allowed in trials, the unique circumstances surrounding Kathleen Savio's death allowed a pastor to testify that he had consulted with Drew and his wife Stacy during their marriage. On one occasion, shortly before Stacy went missing, they met for coffee. During that conversation with the pastor, Casey confided in the pastor that the weekend Kathleen Savio died, Drew came home dressed in black and dumped women's clothing into the washing machine. Stacy further disclosed to the pastor that Drew had confessed to murdering Kathleen by hitting her in the head with a police baton and then arranging her body in the bathtub. Stacy added that Drew had told her she would need to lie to the police when they came by to question them. Stacy's statements to the pastor were admissible in court, as the judge determined they were an exception to the hearsay rule. The circumstances of Kathleen's death, combined with the pastor's testimony regarding Stacy's confession, ultimately led to Drew's conviction for Kathleen's murder. He was sentenced to 38 years in prison during Drew's sentencing hearing. The courtroom was filled with tension and anticipation, unable to contain himself any longer. Drew erupted into a tirade that lasted well over half an hour. Drew's anger was directed towards the prosecutor, Jim Glasgow. He unleashed a barrage of insults and accusations, blaming the prosecutor for everything that had gone wrong with his life. This tirade continued unabated as Drew vented his frustrations and anger. He painted a dark picture of Jim Glasgow, accusing him of manipulation, corruption, and dishonesty. Drew seemed to believe that Jim Glasgow was solely responsible for his current situation, and he vented his frustrations with every word. After Peterson's conviction, his hefty pension was suspended while held in Menard Prison in South Illinois. Peter appealed his conviction. However, these efforts have not yielded any favorable results. So far, the appellate court upheld Drew's conviction during his time at Menard Prison. Drew allegedly tried to have a fellow inmate kill Jim Glasgow, the man who prosecuted him. Drew offered to pay $10,000 to have Glasgow killed. However, the inmate reported Drew's plot to his attorney, who contacted the police. The police placed a wire on the inmate, allowing them to record their conversations with Drew. Drew Peterson was charged with solicitation to murder for hire and was sentenced to another 40 years in prison. This additional sentence further solidified his status as a convicted felon and eliminated any possibility of his release in the near future. The disappearance of Stacy Peterson remains unsolved, and Drew continues to be the prime suspect in the case. Stacy's family and friends continue to seek justice for their loved one. They hope that one day Drew will confess to killing Stacy and reveal the location of her body. However, one of Drew's older sons has expressed skepticism about the Drew telling the truth. He believes that his father desires to go out as a martyr, maintaining his innocence throughout, despite Drew's unwillingness to cooperate. Stacy's family and friends remain steadfast in their pursuit of truth and justice. In May 2022, it was revealed that Drew Peterson's former defense attorney, Joel Brodsky, is considering the release of confidential information protected by attorney-client privilege. This decision has sparked debate among legal professionals and the general public regarding the ethics of disclosing confidential information and the potential consequences that may arise. Stacy's sister, Cassandra, has expressed frustration about the possibility that Joel Brodsky may face legal consequences for revealing sensitive information. However, Cassandra has made it clear that she stands by Joel Brodsky and supports his actions. If he decides to come forward with any information regarding Stacy's disappearance, Joel Brodsky is under a continuing gag order not to disclose anything Drew Peterson shared with him confidentially. It is not clear if Joel Brodsky actually knows any information about the whereabouts of Stacy Peterson. Although he has claimed that he does, Joel Brodsky has stated, "I know everything about both of his wives. I feel bad that Drew Peterson is still not taking responsibility and Stacy Peterson is still missing. I'm thinking about maybe revealing what happened to Stacy and where she is. This potential disclosure of confidential information raises ethical and legal concerns. The attorney-client privilege is intended to protect the confidentiality of communications between an attorney and their client. Any breach of this privilege could have serious consequences for Joel Brodsky and Drew Peterson." Cassandra, Stacy's sister, refuses to lose hope in the quest for finding her sister's remains. Despite the passage of years since Stacy's disappearance, Cassandra remains determined to uncover the truth and bring closure to her family. Recently, she embarked on a groundbreaking expedition with an innovative device utilizing a remote-operated vehicle equipped with sonar technology. Cassandra delved deep into the murky waters of an Illinois canal in a groundbreaking development. Cassandra claims she has made a significant discovery. According to Court TV, a still image from video captured by the aforementioned remote-operated vehicle seems to indicate a skull and several bones submerged beneath the canal's surface. The Illinois State Police, who are overseeing the investigation into Stacy's disappearance, have issued an official statement regarding the matter, acknowledging the importance of every credible and viable lead. They assert that their agents are diligently following up on leads. Cassandra, dissatisfied with the police department's response, decided to take matters into her own hands. She invested her funds into special tech that continued to improve, eventually allowing her to bring the necessary equipment in from Alaska. Her latest discovery was presented to the police, but she was told when they went for a dive-in that they found only a rock and declared the area was clear. Despite the police's disinterest, Cassandra remains hopeful for the search for her sister's body in an effort to raise funds to continue the search. Cassandra launched an online fundraiser to retrieve the remains from the bottom of the canal. According to Cassandra, her sole desire is for Stacy to find peace. She wants her sister to have a proper burial, allowing her loved ones to find closure and say goodbye by story. 4. Meeting the love of their life. Eloping and getting married is something that most teenage girls dream of. Caroline Crouch was no different, a young girl in high school. Only 15 years old, was flattered by a financially well-off 27-year-old pilot who flew his helicopter over her school, winning her heart. The two eloped and got married, but what seemed like the perfect fairy tale love story would soon turn into a murder that fooled the world. On Tuesday, May 11, 2021 at 4:30 a.m., a man named Harel Ambo in Aulos, also known as Babas, was horrifically awakened from bed. At the time of the incident, he had rented a two-story maisonette in the suburbs of Gika, an area located on the outskirts of Athens, Greece. Babas didn't have much time to retaliate, as three men concealing their identity with hoods scuffled and overpowered him. They were armed with pistols and wasted no time in tying up Babas, and afterwards went on to blindfold him with duct tape. He couldn't do much as the intruders then went after his wife, a 19-year-old girl named Caroline Cruncha. This entire incident woke up their 11-month-old daughter, who was sleeping nearby. The intruders, with Greek and Albanian accents, repeatedly asked where the money was. Caroline didn't know that what appeared to be a robbery would turn into her own murder. Caroline Cruncha was born to the retired engineer David Cruncha and Susan Della Costa on July 12, 2001 in Athens. When she was just 8 years old, the family relocated to the island of Alaniso, the place where she had grown up. They moved because both David and Susan had fallen in love with the coastal surroundings. From a very young age, Caroline embraced her beachside life. She was passionate about both scuba diving and swimming. She had met her future husband, Babas, during a Good Friday parade in 2017. At the time, Babas was a commercial helicopter pilot, and Caroline was only 15 years of age. 3 years later, both of them got married in Portugal on July 15, 2019. A few days prior to her murder, Babas and Caroline had purchased a plot of land. Both Babas and Caroline had plans to build their dream house on the land for themselves and their infant daughter. To facilitate purchasing the land, Caroline had gotten 50,000 euros as a gift from her parents. As for the construction costs, the couple had around 10,000 euros hidden away in their house. The public in Greece at the time didn't rely much on banks, as they were at continuous risk of facing bankruptcy. In light of such circumstances, it was common for the general public to have cash stashed away in their house, as it was deemed a safer option. Caroline probably had a similar perspective for storing cash, and by no means would have anticipated what would happen on May 11th. A cry for help. Both Babas and Caroline, alongside their daughter, were tormented with fear. As the intruders asked about the end in an attempt to end the abyss that had befallen them, Babas told them exactly where the money was hidden, a location that's deemed rather unconventional. The intruders opened the Monopoly board game box and took all the money Babas and Caroline had stashed away for their dream house, but they didn't leave. Each one of them kept roaming from room to room as they snatched jewelry and other items of considerable monetary worth. The looters wanted more, but Babas and Caroline had given up all they had, and in a desperation and fear begged for their lives and that of their daughter. Babas could hear the screams of his wife as the intruders held a firearm against the 11-month-old infant. Although blindfolded, he fought continuously against the restraints. However, the rope around his neck was tightened to the extent that he kept fainting. In and out of consciousness, he eventually fainted and then regained his senses. After a while, once conscious, he discovered that the men had left the house at the moment. The only thing he could hear were the painful cries of his infant daughter. In about 30 minutes or so, Babas was able to get close to his mobile phone and dial emergency services using his nose. As soon as the call connected, Babas cried out for help, asking emergency services to send an ambulance and give them his location. Given that he had duct tape around his mouth, the entire call was filled with muffled words. The operator on the other end asked Babas to explain what happened, but robbers came in was all he could say. An hour and a half had gone by since the intruders had broken into Babas and Caroline's residence. First responders arrived at the scene around 6 a.m. as they raced up the front steps to enter the house. What they saw can only be defined as horrific. Inside the living space and kitchen had been completely destroyed. The drawers were open and empty, with clothing and other belongings scattered across the entire space. Among them was an open Monopoly box, the same box in which Babas and Caroline had hidden the money. First responders also found a security cam on the living room couch. It appeared as if it had been ripped off the walls while the camera was lying on the couch. Its memory card was missing. From the staircase hung the corpse of a white and brown husky puppy who had been strangled with her own leash. Babas was found on the floor of the main bedroom. His eyes and mouth were covered in duct tape that reached his neck, and restraints kept his hands and feet behind his back. On the bed, lying face down, was Caroline Crouch. Their infant daughter was beside her, crying, clapping as she pushed her mother in an attempt to wake her up. Caroline is declared dead, their daughter, while in evident distress, appeared to be unharmed. First responders, however, were quick to observe Caroline's pale skin and determined that she was murdered. Babas went into visible shock when he was freed from his restraints and saw the corpse of his wife. The woman he'd been in love with for the past 5 years. The officers were quick to ensure the safety of the infant and began to interrogate Babas based on his side of the story and the state of the crime scene. The presence of 4 men was determined. Police officers concluded that 3 men had entered the house while the 4th kept watch. They interpreted the entire sequence of events up to the murder and escape as follows. 1 intruders approached the house through a dirt road that led to its rear entrance. 2, they failed to break in through the rear door and then removed security pins off a basement window to enter the house. 3, after entering the Masset, they murdered Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, the murder weapon, her own leash 4. The 3 men then entered the main bedroom where Babas and Caroline were asleep. 5, then they damaged the house and took the money out of the Monopoly box. 6, before leaving, they murdered Caroline by smothering her with a pillow. 7, since Babas was drifting in and out of consciousness. The intruders may have assumed he died and left believing that they had left no witnesses behind as far as Caroline's death is concerned. It was revealed that it was not an instant experience. The 20-year-old female suffered an attack that lasted for around 6 minutes. Bruises across her body showed signs of retaliation, and those on her lips and tongue hinted at the possibility of sharp objects being used. No signs of sexual assault were found. Investigation and speculation. Although the damage done to the couple's house was immense, no concrete evidence was left behind by the intruders. The only thing that emergency first responded ERS found in the house was the hood of one of the intruders. Based on how Babas had described the event, it was concluded that the hood must have fallen while Babas was retaliating. This may have been a small piece of evidence for a case of such magnitude, but the hood falling off was enough for Babas to get a glimpse of the culprit. A sketch depicting an overweight, dark-skinned, tall individual was created based on the details Babas shared. Despite being disoriented, Babas was able to identify 2 firearms that were used as well. According to him, the intruders had a black pistol and a silver Colt. Details of the investigation revealed that intruders were able to escape with 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry worth 20,000 euros. In addition, police concluded that this was an act of professional criminals who had observed the family and waited for the right moment to strike. Furthermore, a police spokesperson had stated it was brutal and violent and went on to categorize it as an act of someone with a lack of emotions and a strong anti-social personality. Numerous speculations soon followed as details of the investigation provided more and more insight into the murder. A key trail of thought in everyone's mind was that if money was the motive, why was murder necessary? Some other speculations put forth the claims such as the intruders were high on drugs and could not control their actions, or maybe Caroline saw or knew them. Caroline resisted and fought back, given that she was a black belt kickboxer and intruders had to silence her to keep her under control. Alarms being raised as Caroline may have started to scream when her 11-month-old daughter had a gun against her temple. While all of this was mere speculation, the investigators were certain about one thing. The attack was premeditated. The reason for such an assumption was that the intruders knew the couple had money hidden in the house. Based on this assumption, the police questioned Bavis and Caroline's inner circle. They believed that the gang had been given a tip. Alongside these interrogations, security cam footage from homes and businesses in close proximity was also examined in the footage. The police identified a dark-colored vehicle followed by a motorcycle that was cruising around the couple's house. On the morning of the murder, Caroline Crouch is laid to rest. Caroline Crouch was laid to rest 3 days after the murder. Her burial site was the Greek island of Alanos, the same place her parents had fallen in love with, and the same place where she grew up. Vavas paid tribute to his wife and said he was lucky that he had met Caroline. Very lucky that she loved him, and even more lucky that she was the mother of his daughter. He went on to say that their daughter would grow up not remembering her mother, Bubvis added that Caroline was the joy of life and will always be near him through their daughter. While Caroline was being laid to rest, a car was pulled over in northeast Greece. As a routine stop inside was a 36-year-old Georgian national male, Georgi Harish, en route to the Bulgarian border. He had handed over his passport, but it was soon identified as a fake. Who is this man, and how is this related to Caroline's murder? This man was soon identified as Georgi Haraishi, a violent criminal who had multiple prior convictions. He was wanted for 12 break-ins that were committed all over Athens over the past 6 months. What painted him as the likely culprit was the fact that 3 of these crimes were committed around Bavis in Caroline's neighborhood. One of the 3 was in December when Herod Dishi and 3 others broke into a house through a rear window. Similar to what happened with Bavis and Caroline, they then continued to drag the female occupant by the hair and threatened to slit her throat during that robbery. The group had stolen 10,000 cash and jewelry. Their next hit was on March 7th, just 2 months before Bavis and Caroline made it to their hit list. During this robbery, they tied up 4 others and an older couple along with their cleaning lady, the loot cash, and other items of significant monetary worth. If patterns aren't enough to paint him as the culprit for the murder, and guess what? He had remarkable similarities with the sketch that was made using Bavis. Description of the intruder, the evidence racked up against Harishva included a history of violent break-ins, an attempt to flee the country, and resemblance to the sketch given. All of this, the police were confident that they had found their man. Harishva was arrested and interrogated for 4 days, during which physical means of getting answers were also used. He was repeatedly questioned about getting to the location, entering the house, and killing Caroline. The physical means used to get answers left him concussed. However, he kept his stance and stated that he'd never heard of Caroline Crouch. The evidence police had against him had come up dry. Herod Ishai wasn't their man after all, and was cleared of any involvement in the murder. As a consequence, 3 police officers were demoted from the Athens homicide squad, continuing the investigation. The police set their sights on a local Albanian organized crime group. Initially, they had a list of 100 people that was later narrowed down to 10. These 10 were individuals who were on a list of criminals known as the Red List. Mugshots of each one were shown to Bavis, but the police didn't reveal any other details. The case was taking longer than usual to solve, and the public was beginning to lose patience. Given that crimes based on race had increased, the information on Caroline's case were so scarce that even a huge monetary reward went unclaimed. Residents of Athens by now were living in fear, not knowing who would be the next victim. Media reports from the time cited experts saying that this was not an ordinary case, and if it was, it would have been solved. Some investigation details that were revealed stated that there was no DNA or fingerprints. Caroline's family were obviously grateful for the continued pursuit of justice. Bavis told journalists that he wishes that what was happening to him would never happen to anyone else. He backed police efforts and continued to front the media, all to keep Caroline's case alive. Bavis was even active on social media, answering questions and expressing gratitude for continued support. A breakthrough came on. June 17th. 37 days after Caroline was brutally murdered, a small memorial service was being held for her on Oel Anasis. Those who had come to more noticed the detective at the ceremony. The investigators waited until the event had concluded and then began to approach Bavis, discreetly asking to be escorted to Athens. The detectives at the time had information about the case and urged Bavis to come and identify the man. Bavis, not knowing what lay ahead, agreed. By this time, the investigators had followed up on quite a lot of leads and analyzed some key details the night on which Caroline was killed. These details didn't add up. Bavis had told the police that the intruders broke in from the basement window, but that window was very small, and with the physique of the supposed killer, Bavis had described it was not possible for that to have been the point of entry. B had also claimed that the house had been trashed by the intruders. However, the neighbors told the police that they didn't hear anything of the sort, and the sounds that night were of a couple's puppy crying in distress. No house being trashed, no calls for help, no crying infant. The house didn't have any fingerprints or DNA to top it all. the question of why the intruders would tie up a male and fight a female was raised. Bavis had also claimed that the intruders must have taken out the memory card for the living room security camera. But data from the camera revealed that the card was removed at 1:20 a.m., a few hours before the criminals had supposedly entered the house. Further details were that Caroline was wearing a smartwatch that monitored her pulse. Her pulse readings from 3:58 a.m. indicated she was asleep, but the ones at 4:05 a.m. were up by 50%, indicating severe physical and mental stress, and the readings at 4:11 a.m. indicated that her heart had stopped. This was before the time Bavis had claimed the murder took place. Bavis, on the other hand, had a fitness app on his smartphone. Data from the app revealed that he was moving around during the time in which he was supposed to be tied up. The police had also tried to reenact Bavis dialing emergency services with his phone. However, no one was able to do that. Police investigations revealed that Caroline had attempted to book a hotel for herself and her daughter on the night she was killed. A text message sent to her friend also revealed that she was threatening to leave Bavis back when Bavis had met Caroline. He was on holiday in Alanos. His mother had lived on the island and was a teacher at Caroline's school. Bavis at the time was charismatic. Clever, loved to take photos, and was well off financially. He gained Caroline's attention by flying a helicopter over her school. This was somewhat of a dream that most teenage girls have, but in Caroline's case, she was unaware that this dream would soon turn into a nightmare. She thought they were the perfect match and took her family into confidence, telling them she was happy. Bavis proposed to Caroline a year and a half into their relationship at the time of the proposal. Caroline was underage but turned 18. 3 days later, the couple exchanged vows and settled in Gazina. In the initial years of their marriage, Caroline attended college in Athens and Bavis continued working as a pilot. Both of them were active on social media, sharing the happy life they were living from their social media handles. The couple appeared to be in a joyful relationship filled with love and romance, and the story in Caroline's diary belonged to completely different genres in her diary. She often questioned her relationship with Bavis in the year 2019. She wrote about fighting with Bavis and how serious the fight was. She had mentioned that she was planning on leaving and going to her sister, and that she was unsure if she could continue with him throughout the course of their marriage. Bavis had become increasingly manipulative and somewhat of a control freak. This behavior was rooted back in their non-traditional wedding. When Bavis and Caroline took vows, they abandoned the idea of having a traditional Greek wedding that would be filled with celebrations, family, and friends. Instead, they had eloped. What may have felt like a romantic gesture from the man of her dreams was indeed an attempt to isolate her. The isolation attempts continued when the couple returned home. Bavis was the only one who put food on the table, and Caroline was just a university student without much money. Susan, Caroline's mother, would send some, but that too would be taken by Bavis in her diary. She had written, "I love Bavis so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." Details of a tearful confrontation with her husband were also found in her diary. She had mentioned that she wanted to leave Bavis, but given that she was pregnant, she couldn't. Caroline wrote, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." Another entry dated July 2020 from her diary read, "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told babies I want to leave. I feel awful." The diary also had mentions of a house in Athens located in HRI. What started out as a fairy tale love story for Caroline had now turned into an abyss filled with pain, horror, despair, and a sense of being estranged. An abyss that she couldn't escape, one that would eventually consume her phone records. Hours before her murder also revealed argumentative and combative texts with Bavis while the two were at home together, serving as a testament to how distant and dysfunctional the relationship had become. The investigators told Bavis that he was the new suspect in the murder case. He was shown overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that revealed the inconsistencies with the details he had initially shared. He was interrogated for 8 hours before he broke down. Eventually, he began to confess, but the confession was one filled with fabrication. He told the police that he and Caroline started arguing on May 10th, the night before she was killed. Bavis went on to say that the couple only fought over their daughter and that Caroline was determined to take her and leave. This had made Bavis lose control, given that he claimed that the child was his whole life. Further details of the night from Bavis were that Caroline had thrown the infant child in the cot and told him to leave the house. He mentioned that Caroline was the one who resorted to physical abuse and had pushed him and punched him. Bavis added that because of this, his judgment became clouded. From this point onwards, Bavis lashed out, strangled her, pressed a pillow on her face using his complete body weight, and killed her a cold-blooded murder in front of an 11-month-old child. He mentioned thinking about getting rid of the body, but knew that that would not be possible. Soon after, the thought of framing someone else came to mind. He staged a home invasion, and to make it look real, he even killed Roxy, placed his own child next to the corpse of his wife, and continued by tying himself up with some rope and duct tape. He mentioned that he deserved to be punished and that he owed a big apology to everyone he'd hurt. While he believed that his actions were not justified, he tried to shift blame on Caroline, saying that he had become unstable and aggressive after the couple's one and only child. A child that would now have to grow up without her mother. A child who will never know who her mother was because she was brutally killed by the very man she once loved. The case was later dubbed the murder that fooled the world. Bavis had become so confident about getting away with the murder that he didn't bother to destroy key evidence in May 2022. He was charged and found guilty of premeditated murder, preventing the course of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. Story 5. Lori was born on December the 31st, 1976, and was adopted by Thelma and Araldo Soares. Her parents met when they served as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Brazil, her parents instilled in her a love for her faith. After her parents separated, Lori and her mother moved to Orem, Utah, 40 miles south of Salt Lake City. Here she attended Orem High School, where she was known for her organization determination and fun personality. Lori's high school years marked a significant milestone for her as she met Mark. Hacking, their relationship quickly blossomed, and they became known for their high school couple antics. They attended all the homecoming and proms together, appearing like any other young couple in love. Mark Hacking, known for his helpful nature, often spent time at Lori's home and took care of errands around her mother's house. He would even offer to fix things, earning him a special place in the hearts of Lori's family. Lori's brother jokingly expressed jealousy because Mark received more attention from Thelma, Lori, and his mother than he did. However, Lori's family genuinely appreciated Mark's willingness to assist and care for them. Lori and Mark's puppy love grew into a full romance, and on August 7th, 1999, they married in Bountiful, Utah. By 2004, Lori was working as an assistant manager at a financial institution, while Mark, having just graduated from the University of Utah, had recently been accepted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in their medical school. Mark's plans to attend medical school were not a surprise, as he came from a prominent and intelligent family. Both his father and brothers were doctors, and another of his worked for the government in the summer of 2004. Lori and Mark planned to move from Utah to North Carolina. Lori, who was pregnant, was thrilled about the move, as was Lori's mother, Thelma, who couldn't wait to be a grandmother. She particularly hoped for a little girl with big curls like Lori. On July 19, 2004, Lori, a 30-year-old woman, mysteriously vanished. Without a trace, at approximately 5:15 a.m., who was 5 months pregnant at the time, had set off for a jog at Memory Grove Park near Creek City Canyon. It was her routine to head for work in Caney City afterward. However, Lori never arrived that afternoon, prompting her boss to contact her husband, Mark. Mark, immediately worried, called the police to report Lori's disappearance. Mark arrived at Memory Grove Park at 10:07 a.m., knowing that this was the final location where Lori was supposed to be, and found Lori's vehicle in the parking lot. Memory Grove Park was eerily quiet, and Mark's heart raced with fear. Patrol officers met him outside the park and briefed detectives on the circumstances surrounding Lori's disappearance. Patrol officers feared the worst, believing that Lori may have fallen into the canyon, gotten hurt, and become stranded in the dense woods. Given the nature of Laura's disappearance, the patrol officers believed that it was crucial to involve the homicide detectives. The steep walls of the canyon added to the urgency of the situation, as officers were concerned that the pregnant woman could have sustained injuries and be in need of immediate assistance. Lori Hacking's mysterious disappearance shocked the community and prompted an outpouring of support and assistance from friends and family. Her husband, Mark Hacking, appeared devastated as he pleaded for help in finding his missing wife. His public appeals generated attention from various media outlets, and he willingly spoke to any reporter who inquired about Laura's disappearance. He expressed deep concern and pleaded for anyone to assist with the search officers with the Salt Lake City Police Department, actively investigating the matter, called for a large-scale search effort at Memory Grove Park. They requested the assistance of at least 3,000 volunteers who would be willing to come out and help look for Lori or any evidence that she may have been there. The involvement of Mark's LDS Church played a crucial role in the case. Many members of the congregation rallied around the young couple, offering their support and assistance. Their presence at the search site strengthened and encouraged Mark, who was facing immense pressure. As the investigation unfolded, numerous homes lined the walkway leading to Memory Grove Park, where Lori was allegedly last seen. The officers conducted a thorough canvass of the area, seeking information from anyone who might have seen or heard anything suspicious. Lori was easily recognizable with her distinctive bushy dark curls, and the officers believed her appearance would stand out to the residents. Their hopes were briefly dashed when one woman told police that she had seen Lori near Memory Grove that morning. However, this woman later withdrew her claim. As the search for Lori continued, the Salt Lake City Police Department set up a command post near the park's entrance. Mark's brothers arrived at the scene, as did Lori's mother. One of Mark's brothers suggested checking out a homeless encampment in the canyon, expressing his concerns regarding the involvement of these individuals in Laura's disappearance. The detectives recognized the importance of considering all possibilities and acknowledged the need to investigate the homeless encampment. They knew that unraveling the truth would not be easy, and every detail needed to be examined carefully. When detectives arrived at the home of Mark Hacking and Lori Hacking, they were already aware that in most cases, when an individual goes missing, their partner usually commits the crime. In addition, the detectives considered the possibility that Lori was involved romantically with another person, and that this involvement may have contributed to her disappearance. The detectives requested permission from Mark to enter their apartment and obtain a recent photograph of Lori for their missing person flyer. Mark agreed, and the detectives were allowed to enter the apartment. Once inside, the detectives asked Mark if they could conduct a cursory look around the premises. Once again, Mark gave his consent. During the search, one of the detectives noticed a red purse in the residence. This purse belonged to Lori, and inside they found her wallet with identification and credit cards. The detectives wondered why Lori would have gone to Memory Grove Park for exercise and left her car parked near the entrance to the park, but not taken her bag with her. Further, the detective observed a large bouquet on the kitchen counter, leading her to believe that Mark bought these flowers for Lori as an apology. The detective noticed this pattern in marriages where husbands bought large bouquets to express remorse. This discovery sparked her curiosity, and she wondered if there were underlying issues with Mark and Laura's marriage. Upon entering the bathroom, the detective observed that it appeared spotless and had recently been scrubbed clean. The room of bleach, indicating that the base had recently been cleaned with disinfectant. This discovery piqued the detective's interest, as it suggested that someone had taken great care to erase any trace of evidence. Moving on to the bedroom, the detective observed a new set of sheets on the bed. They were still brand new, with noticeable creases and no indication of having been washed. As she glanced into Laura's jeweler box, the detective noticed Laura's wedding band, which seemed unusual. The detective wondered why a happily married woman would not wear her wedding band. Although the evidence was circumstantial, the detective began forming a theory about Mark's involvement in Laura's disappearance. Each piece of evidence presented in the investigation seemed insignificant on its own. However, when combined, these items painted a disturbing picture. Laura's absence raised red flags, and suspicions began to mount against her husband Mark as the search for Lori intensified. Various law enforcement agencies joined forces to try and locate the missing woman. K-9 units were deployed to search Memory Grove Park using their keen sense of smell to comb through the dense undergrowth. Officers on horseback and bikes ventured into the steep canyon, diligently navigating the challenging terrain. Choppers equipped with state-of-the-art cameras and sensors soared overhead, providing a panoramic view of the park from above. Laura's disappearance had a profound impact on her family, including her in-laws. Douglas hacking. Mark's father spoke out to the media, sharing his unwavering belief that Lori had been abducted. He stated that the family did not entertain the notion that Lori had run away, as they knew she was a responsible and devoted person. The entire family was deeply worried and concerned about her well-being, leaving no one untouched by their anguish. Mark hacking met with a detective at the police department for an interview. The detective posed questions regarding the state of his marriage, and Mark assured the detective that everything was fine. However, considering the mounting evidence and the suspicion surrounding him, this claim seemed suspicious. According to Mark, he and Lori were packing their belongings to move to North Carolina, where he would soon be starting medical school. This revelation piqued the interest of the detective, who couldn't help but be intrigued. The detective, curious about Mark's chosen specialty, asked Mark what his area of expertise was going to be. To the detective's surprise, Mark replied that he would be specializing in oncology. Seeking further insight into Mark's credibility, the detective decided to test his knowledge. She asked Mark how to spell the word oncology. However, Mark was unable to provide the correct answer. As they continued the interview, the detective observed Mark's behavior closely. Although Mark appeared to be crying, she never witnessed tears coming from his eyes. This discrepancy raised suspicions, leading the detective to believe Mark was putting on a show deep down. The detective had a gut feeling that something bad had happened to Lori and Mark was responsible. However, she sincerely hoped Lori could still be alive. Waiting to be rescued, the detectives approached Mark and requested permission to search his red truck. As they meticulously combed through the vehicle, Mark stood right alongside them. On the seat, the detective discovered a receipt for a mattress company, dated the same day that Lori went missing. This discovery raised several questions for the detective. Why did Mark, whose pregnant wife had vanished, purchase a shiny new mattress on the same day? However, as the detective prepared to question Mark about the receipt, he noticed that the witness had mysteriously disappeared. Determined to uncover more evidence, the detective returned to Mark's apartment. This time, the detective requested Mark's signature on an official consent form, permitting them to conduct a more extensive search. Mark agreed, allowing the detectives to enter his house. Once inside, the detective confronted Mark with the receipt they had found in his possession. They noticed a particular sight as they confronted him: a new mattress on Mark and Laura's bed. However, the box spring did not match the mattress. The prints and the colors of each item were noticeably different. Raising suspicions among the detectives, this discovery served as a catalyst for further questioning. The detective confronted Mark with the unusual circumstance and questioned him about the mattress. They observed that the mattress and the box spring did not match, leading them to believe that it may have been purchased recently. Mark's reaction indicated that the detective had hit a nerve. As the detectives continued their search of Mark in Laura's apartment, they stumbled upon a discovery that raised suspicion. On the nights next to Mark's bed, they discovered several knives. Upon closer examination, the detectives noticed that one of the knives had been hidden in a sheath. Upon removing the knife, they noticed red stains on the blade, which they believed were human blood. However, when questioned, Mark claimed that he used the knife for hunting purposes. The discovery of the knife prompted the detectives to discontinue the consensual search of the residence and call in a crime scene investigator team. They began working diligently to obtain a search warrant, as they firmly believed something sinister had occurred inside Laura's home. While investigating the premises, the detectives made another intriguing observation in the parking lot. The detectives noticed a dumpster. Upon peering inside, they discovered that it was empty. However, at the bottom of the dumpster, the detectives spotted a package for bed sheets, 2 pillows, and packing for a mattress. This discovery further fueled their suspicions. Their investigation led them to believe that Mark had killed Lori and disposed of her body in a dumpster. When the detective spoke to her superior sergeant about the suggestion regarding the possibility that Lori's remains might be present at the landfill, the sergeant dismissed these concerns as too extensive and costly. However, as the sergeant was driving home, he stopped by the LDS church that Mark and Lori had attended. He noticed a dumpster in the parking lot, which caught his ATT attention. Upon closer examination, the sergeant discovered that the mattress inside the dumpster had the pillow top cut off, matching the description of the box spring in Lori and Mark hackings. Home, the discovery made by the sergeant confirmed that the detective's initial suggestion was valid and that Lori's body was likely located at the landfill around the same time the officer on night watch called to inform the police working on Lori's disappearance that Mark had been spotted at a local motel running around naked. This incident further fueled suspicion surrounding Mark's involvement and added to the body of evidence suggesting his involvement in Lori's disappearance. An officer arrived at the motel and encountered Mark. The officer noticed that Mark was acting strangely and was completely naked. However, the officer noticed that Mark had the wherewithal to put on his shoes before running around the parking lot, which led the officer to believe that Mark was faking his behavior. Someone in their right mind would not have even realized they did not have shoes on. Mark's brother was called to the motel and assisted the officer in transporting Mark to the hospital at the University of Utah. As the investigation of Lori's disappearance continued, detectives received information from officials at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The officials contacted the detectives and informed them that Mark Hacking, who was scheduled to start an oncology program at the university, was not registered for classes. Furthermore, they had stated that they had never heard of Mark Hacking. That afternoon, the detective visited Mark at the hospital. The detective was surprised that Mark no longer exhibited any signs of emotional distress. Instead, he seemed relaxed and content. Mark was seated comfortably, engrossed in eating a pizza and watching television. The detective initiated the interview, reiterating the same line of questioning that had been conducted previously. Mark continued to stick to the story that Lori had never returned home from her morning jog. As the interview progressed, Doug, Mark's father, was present. Doug pressed Mark, urging him to tell the truth if he had done something. However, Mark met his father's gaze with a determined expression, maintaining that he had not done anything, confident in his son's integrity. Doug believed Mark's words. After thorough investigations, the detectives discovered that Mark was not enrolled in medical school in North Carolina. They confronted Thelma Lore's mother with this information, hoping to shed light on Mark's true intentions. Thelma initially refused to believe the detectives, dismissing their claims as mere speculations. However, her resolve faltered when the detective revealed that Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah. This revelation left Thelma in a state of shock and disbelief, thinking back to past events. Thelma realized that there had been signs that something was not quite right. During Mark's graduation ceremony at the University of Utah, she heard him vomiting in the bathroom. The illness prevented him from attending the ceremony, but feeling sorry for her son-in-law, Thelma took a picture of him in the cap and gown. Later in their apartment, initially, Thelma remained loyal to her son-in-law Mark, thinking there was no way he would ever hurt Lori. However, the detectives believed that he was a frauder who had initially made himself sick in order to avoid having to tell his wife and mother-in-law that he was not graduating. The detectives believed that Mark's lies had finally caught up with him, and this played a role in Lori's disappearance on July 20th. 2,424 hours into the investigation of Lori's disappearance, a store clerk from a nearby shop contacted the detectives to report an incident on the evening of July 18th at 9:45 p.m. The clerk stated that Lori and her boyfriend Mark had entered the store and purchased the soda. According to the information provided, Mark exhibited strange behavior and approached the store clerk, whispering instructions not to inform Lori that he had frequently purchased cigarettes there upon reviewing the CCTV footage from the store. During that time, the detectives were able to confirm the clerk's account. The video showed Lori dressed in green scrub-style pants and a tan shirt, and Mark entering the shop. The detectives believed that this was the last confirmed sighting of Lori alive. The search efforts for Lori continued for 3 days, with hundreds of people coming out to assist in the search. Thelma Lore's mother made an emotional plea to the public, begging for the return of her only daughter. She pleaded that if anyone had Lori, they should let her go because it was July. The temperatures in the canyon reached upwards of 100 degrees. The scorching heat made it grueling for the searchers, but their mission to find Lori continued relentlessly. However, while this was going on, Mark was in the hospital, recovering from a mental health episode, his brothers. Growing increasingly suspicious of Mark's involvement in Lore's disappearance, pressed him again for answers. This time, Mark confessed that he did something he admitted to having killed Lori. According to Mark, Lori had discovered that he wasn't a graduate of the University of Utah who was supposedly attending medical school in North Carolina. This revelation shattered Lore's trust. In Mark leaving her devastated, she felt that her whole life had been built on a lie before Lori could file for divorce. Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. He shot and disposed of her body in a dumpster once Mark confessed to his brothers, and then the detectives. The search for Lori in the canyon was called off and moved to the landfill, and near 3 dozen officers showed up at the 10-acre landfill to search for Lore's body between the 2 days when the detectives believed Lore's body had been picked up in a dumpster and disposed of in the landfill. Nearly 4,000 tons of trash had been dumped there, which presented a significant challenge for investigators, as they had to navigate an overwhelming volume of debris. The search for Lori was exhaustive and physically demanding. With temperatures reaching soaring heights, the search for Lori was a coordinated effort involving numerous agencies and professionals. Cab dogs and earth movers were utilized to assist in locating any potential evidence. These specialized tools helped narrow down the search area and provide crucial leads at 8:20 a.m. On October 1st, 2004, human remains were uncovered in the landfill. This discovery was a significant breakthrough in the case, offering hope for a resolution to the mystery of Lore's disappearance. The remains were meticulously examined and subjected to a meticulous identification process. Through the use of dental records, the remains were later confirmed to be Lori hacking. This crucial information provided a definitive answer to her desperate search, offering a shred of closure to her family in April 2005. Mark Hacking, Lore's husband, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Mark was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison on June 6, 2005. The Utah State Board of Pardons subsequently announced that Mark would be ineligible for parole until 2035. Lore's family decided to remove Mark, Hacking's last name, from her headstone. This decision was taken to honor Lore's memory and assert her independence in the face of Mark's actions by removing Mark's last name. Lore's family sought to emphasize her individuality and the strength she possessed throughout her life. 1 year after Mark Hacking's conviction for the murder of his wife, Lori Hacking, it came to light that he had been engaging in illicit activities while incarcerated in the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison, Utah. It was discovered that Mark had been selling personal items, including auto spares, hand tracing, and other prison forms on an online website called Murder Auction. According to prison officials, Mark initially denied the allegations, but upon further investigation, he agreed to cease his online sales activity. This discovery has sparked outrage and renewed concern about the integrity of prison systems. Story 6, Allison Dickey was born on July 1, 1968. In growing up, she possessed a remarkable talent for ballet. Her passion and dedication to the art form were evident from a young age. As time passed, Allison's talent grew and she found herself on the path to becoming an exceptional ballerina on August 23, 1997. Allison married Gerard Benin Clay. Gerard was an accountant at the Flight Center in Brisbane, where he and his wife worked. Born in September 1970 in Bournemouth, England, Gerard's family relocated to Australia during the 1980s. Interestingly, Gerard's father's grandfather was Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Scouting movement. Over the years, Allison and Gerard built a life together. They eventually had 3 daughters and chose to settle in the suburb of Brookfield in Queensland. Many people were drawn to the area due to its proximity to the city, allowing residents to enjoy the best of both worlds. By 2012, Allison was already an executive at the Flight Center. On the other hand, Gerard had ventured into real estate several years prior and had achieved remarkable success from the outside. The Bay and Clay family seemed to have a perfect life. They were widely admired and respected in their community, and their friends and family members envied their beautiful existence. However, all that changed on Friday, April 20th, 2012 at around 7 a.m. Gerard called emergency services, informing them that his wife Allison had gone missing. Gerard stated that Allison often took walks around 5 a.m., and initially he had assumed that was where she could be. However, as the hours passed and Allison failed to return home to prepare breakfast for their 3 daughters, as was her routine, Gerard's concern grew. The police took Allison's disappearance seriously and swiftly formed a task force because Allison was so well known. Everyone knew she wouldn't walk away from her 3 daughters, all under the age of 10. Allison's disappearance affected the entire community, causing a sense of fear and worry. During the investigation into Allison's disappearance, the police utilized a local clubhouse in Brookfield as their headquarters. This location served as a central location to process the numerous tips regarding Allison's whereabouts. The clubhouse provided ample space for the officers to organize and review the information gathered with a sense of urgency. Police officers began their search for Allison in parks and creeks. The office ERS diligently combed through these areas, hoping to spot clues or leads that could lead them to Allison. As the news of Allison's disappearance spread throughout the community, volunteers began to show up in droves, eager to help in any way they could. Brookfield was a close-knit community, and the news of such a traumatic event affecting one of their own resonated with everyone. Volunteers from all walks of life came together to form search parties determined to uncover any trace of Allison on April the 23rd, 2012. 3 days after Gerard reported Allison missing her parents, Jeff and Priscilla Dickey appealed to the media, pleading that they needed to find their daughter. It was an emotional moment for everyone, as it was clear something bad must have happened to Allison as more time passed with no indication of her, while Allison was missing her husband. Gerard raised red flags to the police. Gerard wasn't acting distressed or frantic with worry, but rather appeared cool and calm. He wasn't taking part in looking for Allison with the search parties, even though there were strangers participating at one point. Gerard moved himself and his daughters out of his home and into his parents' house when a reporter found him there. Gerard was very evasive as she tried to speak to him. Gerard's demeanor was unsettling. His voice was high-pitched and strained, and he refused to make eye contact with her. The reporter couldn't help but be struck by Gerard's unusual behavior. Although she could tell he was nervous during the interview, she didn't feel he genuinely cared about his wife's whereabouts. Gerard's responses felt rehearsed, as if he had been reciting them from a script. As the interview progressed, the reporter couldn't help but notice that Gerard did not come across as a desperate man looking for his missing wife. His demeanor remained detached, as if he was going through the motions without emotion. It was as if he had memorized the lines and was now playing the role of a grieving husband. When the police heard the news reporter had found Gerard at his sister's house, they were eager to speak with her. They asked the reporter if she had noticed any scratches on Gerard's face, suspecting that it might have been a result of the altercation with his wife Allison, who had gone missing. The reporter reviewing the footage from the interview noticed something peculiar. Gerard was deliberately obscuring one side of his face during the interview. This behavior raised the officers' suspicions further, as they wondered if Gerard had cuts or wounds on his face that he was trying to hide. Eventually, the police located Gerard and noticed 2 deep gashes in his cheek. Suspicious, the detectives questioned Gerard about how he had received those wounds. Gerard claimed that he had accidentally cut himself while shaving. However, the detectives doubted his statement, as they believed that the cuts did not resemble a typical shaving injury. Despite their suspicions regarding Gerard and his wife's disappearance, the police lacked conclusive evidence to link him to it. They continued to investigate and gather evidence, hoping to find any leads or evidence to prove his involvement. Until that time, Gerard remained a person of interest in the case, but the police were unable to gather sufficient evidence to charge him with any crime. The police in Brookfield questioned the residents who knew the Ben and Clay family. They were very interested in learning about Allison's husband, Gerard. a prominent real estate agent and former president of the Chamber of Commerce. Despite Gerard's high status within the community, many people described him to the detectives as a grandiose phony, constantly condescending to others as rumors regarding Gerard's involvement in his wife's disappearance began to spread. They gained more intensity. Gerard and his parents desperately tried to avoid the media, resorting to various tactics to hide from the prying eyes of the press whenever reporters approached Gerard, or his relatives would make every effort to flee, even jumping over fences and changing cars to evade reporters. In contrast, Allison's loved ones who were concerned about her disappearance maintained a constant vigil at the task force headquarters. Day after day, they waited, hoping for updates on our whereabouts. Their determination provided them with a much-needed sense of purpose during a time of uncertainty while Allison was missing. The police asked residents to check their properties for any sign of Allison, such as her clothing. To show the public the clothes Allison had on, the police utilized an innovative effort. The police set up a mannequin on the side of a highway dressed in the same clothing Allison had on the day she went missing. This innovative approach aimed to raise awareness about the case and prompt potential witnesses to come forward with information. Nearly 400 volunteers came out during Allison's disappearance to look for her on foot and horseback, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The community members came together to lend a helping hand in the search efforts. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate any sign of the missing mother on April 30th, 2012. Daryl Joyce, a professor of horticulture and a Brisbane resident, was kaying on the Brisbane River. Daryl had taken to the water in his canoe, enjoying the serenity and beauty of the surrounding area. As he was paddling along, he decided to explore a small creek known as Colo Creek. Little did he know that this decision would lead him to the discovery of a disturbing find. As Daryl paddled upstream and saw what looked to be a body underneath the creek bank, the sight caught his attention. Curiosity got the better of him. Determined to confirm his suspicions, Daryl rode closer the closer he got. The stronger the smell of human decomposition became. It could only mean one thing. The body lying beneath the bridge was human. When Daryl approached the body, he realized it was dressed in the same clothing as the mannequin displayed along the highway. The coincidence was unsettling. Daryl's instincts told him this could be a significant lead in the case, since Daryl could do nothing for Allison. At that point, he rode out of Colo Creek back up the Brisbane River to his car where he had service and called the police. He waited for authorities to arrive on May 1st. An autopsy was conducted on the body discovered in Coo Creek. The examination revealed the identity of the deceased as Allison Bayan Clay and determined that the cause of death was undetermined. However, the examination revealed significant decomposition with discoloration and loss of soft tissue, especially on her face. Despite the severity of the decomposition, the medical examiner did identify a 5-centimeter discoloration on Allison's inner chest, which the medical examiner believed could have been a bruise and would have been caused by mild blunt force trauma. During the autopsy tests of Allison's lungs showed no indication of water, which the medical examiner concluded meant she did not drown. This finding further indicated that the cause of death may have been non-accidental. The medical examiner also ruled out the possibility of Allison falling 14 from the bridge above where she was found, as the examination revealed no evidence of fractures or injuries. Toxicology tests conducted during Allison's autopsy revealed elevated levels of Zoloft, an antidepressant, in her system. Allison did have a prescription for the drug, so these elevated levels were to be expected. The medical examiner stated that it was impossible to determine the exact date of death based on the rate of decomposition. However, she might have died within 11 days of her disappearance, which was around the same time she vanished. Based on the patterns of discoloration and decomposition of Allison's body, the medical examiner concluded that the body was likely placed where it was found on the creek bed soon after her death. The examiner was unable to identify a specific cause of death for Allison, as she had no history of significant disease. However, the crime scene was inconsistent with natural death. Overall, the medical examiner felt that Allison did not die of natural causes. Despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Allison's death, the police determined that she did not take her own life. The detectives investigated the matter thoroughly, and during their inquiries, they spoke to Allison's doctor. According to the doctor, she visited him about a month before she vanished. During the visit, Allison reportedly expressed concerns about experiencing mood swings. The doctor further mentioned that when he first saw Allison in May 2011, she told him that she was experiencing feelings of guilt, anxiety, worry, low mood, and tiredness. Based on her symptoms, the doctor prescribed the antidepressant Zoloft. After 3 months, he conducted a mental health assessment and determined that Allison received a score of 18 out of 50 as the highest level of distress the doctor shared with the detectives. His conclusion that Allison did not experience a significant level of stress in her life and was not at a high risk of taking her own life. Based on the assessment score, the doctor believed that she was managing her mental well-being fairly well. On May 11th, a funeral service was held for the beloved mother of 3 in Ipswich. Allison's family and friends were devastated that she was gone and that her 3 young daughters would be left without a loving and caring mother. The service was attended by those who loved her, including her closest friends and family members. Law enforcement officers who had been involved in the investigation were personally affected by her disappearance and ultimately the discovery of her body. They had hoped to bring her home safely, but instead found themselves faced with the tragic reality of her demise. Even reporters who had covered Allison's case felt a sense of defeat. They had hoped for a happy ending, but instead had to report on the tragic conclusion. After Allison's body was found in Colorado Creek, the police intensified their investigation into what or who killed her and how she got out to the creek. They suspected that Gerard, Allison's husband, had a role in her death, and so they dug deeper into who Gerard was. What they discovered was a shocking revelation. Gerard had presented himself to the public as a hardworking, devoted husband and father. However, ever in reality, he was living a double life. The detectives uncovered that Gerard had been involved in an extramarital affair with his employee, Tony McHugh. Tony spoke to the detectives and shared that her affair with Gerard began in August 2008. According to Tony, in September 2011, Gerard's wife Allison found out about the relationship and demanded that they seek help through counseling. As a result, Gerard ended the 3-year affair. However, Tony informed the police 3 months later that she and Gerard had rekindled their relationship. Tony alleged that Gerard had professed his love for her and claimed he was planning to leave Allison to be with her. She believed that Gerard would eventually follow through on this promise. According to Tony, Gerard revealed to her that he had been involved in 2 other extramarital affairs. As the detectives delved deeper into Gerard's identity, they uncovered a series of difficulties that plagued the man. Despite his successful career in real estate, Gerard had been struggling to make ends meet. The disastrous Brisbane floods had dealt a serious blow to his financial stability. The investigation also revealed that Gerard held a substantial life insurance policy valued at $800,000 on Allison. Coincidentally, on the day Allison's body was found in the creek, Gerard made a claim to the insurance company for the death benefit. During the investigation into Allison's death, Gerard became the center of attention. This media frenzy intensified with round-the-clock news coverage dedicated to Gerard and his parents' house, where he was staying. Streets of Brookfield were filled with conversations regarding the case as people eagerly followed every development. Investigators conducted extensive searches of Gerard's parents' house and the house he shared with Allison in Brookfield. They meticulously gathered potential evidence, filling bags with the items they discovered. The scrutiny surrounding Gerard intensified as the investigation progressed, leaving him under immense pressure. The botanist expert assigned to the case meticulously examined the leaf material found on Allison's body. He discovered 6 distinct plant species. This botanist requested permission from the police to visit the area where the canoeist and her house found Allison's body. His goal was to gather additional evidence and determine where the plant matter originated at the crime scene at Colorado Creek. Armed with a notebook and camera, the botanist recorded the plant species present and compared them to the species he had discovered on Allison's body. The botanist expert's examined determined that the plant matter found at the crime scene did not match all of the ones he had seen on Allison's body. Determined to uncover the truth behind Allison's murder, the botanist proceeded to her house to his surprise, he found all 6 plant species he had discovered earlier present in her backyard. This discovery provided crucial evidence linking Allison's home to her death. This botanist expert shared his discovery with the detectives, informing them that the leaf material found in Allison's hair matched the species present in her house based on the botanist expert's findings. The detectives speculated that Allison was likely killed somewhere on her back patio. The presence of plant matter from her home, as defined by the botanist, supported the theory that her body was then transported to Colorado Creek. The detectives had a hunch that Allison had never gone for a walk on the day Gerard reported her missing. In fact, they believed that she had already been killed and that Gerard knew the truth. Their investigation focused on determining if Gerard had used Allison's vehicle to transport her body from their home. Upon examining it, the investigators found traces of Allison's blood in the trunk and on the door. On June 13, 2012, Gerard, accompanied by his attorney, arrived at the police station where he was formally interviewed. During this interview, Gerard was charged with Allison's murder and interfering with her corpse. He maintained his innocence and stated that he intended to plead not guilty. However, his application for bail was denied on June 22nd, as the judge deemed him a significant flight risk. When Gerard was taken into custody, it confirmed what many had already expected, that he was indeed involved in Allison's tragic death. The circumstantial evidence surrounding the case had led the public to form this belief, and the arrest merely confirmed their suspicions. However, while the public was not surprised, they were also relieved. Gerard's arrest brought a sense of closure and reassurance to those who were affected by Allison's death. It was a step towards justice and retribution. Providing solace to those who had loved Allison, the relief felt by the public was not necessarily rooted in the sense of satisfaction or gloating. It was more a relief that the truth had finally been revealed and that the perpetrator would be held accountable for their actions. Gerard's arrest provided a sense of security, knowing that a dangerous man was no longer a threat to society. 2 years after Gerard Ben Clay was arrested, he went on trial on June 10th. 2014, in the Brisbane Supreme Court. During the trial, the prosecution read aloud a portion of Allison's diary which highlighted the struggles within her marriage with Gerard. The diary entries revealed the extent of Allison's insecurities about Gerard's affair and the emotional abuse she suffered. Allison expressed her frustration and loneliness in her diary, stating that she longed for love and intimacy but felt unable to do so in her marriage. Allison described feeling emotionally distant from her husband and expressed her doubts and fears about their marriage and Gerard's faithfulness. One of the most compelling diary entries was dated 2 days before Allison's disappearance. In this entry, Allison wrote about how the idea of Gerard's affair made her feel sick and dirty. She described feeling betrayed and humiliated, stating that she could no longer tolerate the strain and distress caused by her husband's infidelity. Gerard's defense attorney argued that the evidence presented during the trial was circumstantial and failed to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Gerard was guilty of murder. After 5 days of deliberation, the jurors returned a verdict of guilty on May 13, 2014. He was sentenced to life in prison and ordered to serve a minimum of 15 years before becoming eligible for parole. The Queensland Court of Appeals heard Gerard's appeal on August 7, 2015. Several months later, on December 8, the court downgraded his conviction to manslaughter based on a review of the evidence presented at his trial. According to the appeals court, the evidence presented did not exclude a reasonable theory that there was a physical confrontation between Gerard and Allison, during which Gerard delivered a blow that caused her death and intended to cause her serious harm. Following the downgrading of Gerard's conviction, there was a strong public reaction. Proponents for the murder conviction held a rally on December 18th, during which they appealed to the High Court of Australia. Over 4,000 people gathered at King George Square in Brisbane to show their support for the appeal. However, some legal professionals defended the decision by the Court of Appeals to change Gerard's conviction from murder to manslaughter. The Queensland Director of Public Prosecutions decided to appeal against the downgrade of the original trial murder conviction of Allison Ben Clay. In August 2016, the High Court of Australia restored the original trial murder conviction. Reinstating the original verdict, Allison's father was appointed as the executive of her estate. The court ruled that Gerard Allison's husband was not entitled to her life insurance policy payout. Instead, all the funds were directed towards her 3 daughters in 2015. Allison's loved ones launched the Allison Bayenne Clay Foundation. This organization aims to establish a community in Queensland that acknowledges and addresses the prevalence of domestic and family violence. The foundation's primary objective is to raise awareness about this issue and provide support for those affected by it. Allison's sister Vanessa Fowler spoke about her sister's unhappy 15-year marriage. Vanessa, who co-chaired Queensland's Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council in 2021, decided to embark on a coercive control campaign as part of her efforts to raise awareness about this issue. In this role, Vanessa was able to shed light on the experiences of victims of domestic violence and advocate for positive change. Vanessa shared her insights with the Sunday Mail, stating that she believes Gerard's control over Allison began when she became a stay-at-home mom. Gerard's control over Allison became more apparent as he monitored her conversations through the baby monitor, controlled the family's finances, and even deleted the phone numbers of her loved ones on her cell phone and blocked them from calling their house. According to Vanessa, Gerard's actions were part of his coercive control campaign to gain and maintain power over Allison by isolating her from her support system. Gerard could exert more control over her life. Vanessa's role as co-chair of the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council gave her a platform to bring attention to the issue of domestic violence as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, ashish, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.